And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio. This is episode number 317 of the Assembly Call and episode 26 of Assembly Call Radio, which we are recording on the evening of Thursday, May 4th, 2017. So as you can see, this is Andy Bottoms, and I'm going to be your host for this edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each Friday we break down the most important IU basketball stories in the past 7 days. You can find us right here every week. And of course, once the season starts, you can catch us immediately after every IU basketball game. And I know most of us cannot wait until that point of the season is actually here. But you can catch us on the Assembly Call IU postgame show, or you can watch us live at assemblycall.com or on YouTube Live, and plan to do Facebook Live as we get ready for this upcoming season. And if you happen to miss one of those shows, you can always listen to the podcast. Search for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, and more, and you'll find us. So Jared Morris, your normal host, has the week off. And as Ryan and I typically joke, this is our regular reminder of just how valuable he is as we try to muddle our way through this without him. So hopefully we will do him proud in his absence. And, even without him, we want to still, pay homage to him and keep with his opening segment of the show and begin this one how we always begin, with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And so for me, ever since Archie was named the coach, it feels like the news cycle has gone pretty much nonstop. We've learned more about his coaching philosophy. We've been introduced to the staff at pretty great length a couple weeks ago. And we've kind of hung on every word from the recruiting trail as we've seen the inside-out recruiting plan get put into action. We've seen him re-recruit the existing players and have started to watch the roster take shape. It's mostly, at least at this point, for the upcoming season. So, this week actually, by comparison to some of the others, felt a little light. The recruiting, kind of the open period to watch recruits ended up over the weekend. So there's a little bit less news on that front. But there was one big story, and that's where I wanted to go with the banner moment. To be fair, I'm not sure how exactly I would tie this into IU being closer to hanging a banner, other than it gets IU closer to having a valid roster for the upcoming season. But that was with Thomas Bryant, deciding to sign with an agent this week. And, I think there's been a lot of discussion about this. People certainly have their opinions about whether this was a good or bad decision for Thomas. I guess from my perspective, I'll at least look at what he brought to IU over these last couple seasons, the things that we'll remember about him from an enthusiasm standpoint, watching him really develop his outside shot. And really just, be the barometer, kind of the emotional barometer, I guess, for the team and how they've been over the last couple of years. As you watch some of the breakdowns of him, you see him run the floor and some of the great things he could do from that perspective. Certainly the game against Kentucky in the tournament a season ago is one that will always be really well thought of and well remembered from Thomas. And, certainly I think on behalf of all IU fans, wish him nothing but the best as he moves forward with his invite to the Combine, which is in Chicago starting either this weekend or next week, and certainly wish him the best. I think he's a guy who, at least from a just personality standpoint, I think will fare well during the interview process of things, and certainly physically, his wingspan is going to serve him well. And so I think a lot of things to like about him, and really interested to see, maybe for different reasons, but similar to what we've kind of watched from a year ago with Yogi and Troy leaving and finding a way to make their mark in the NBA just over the course of the first season. Just really looking forward to see how he responds, and want to thank him for his time as a Hoosier, and he will certainly always be one in our eyes. And with that, I'd like to introduce my esteemed co-host. Ryan is back. Ryan and I, this is the off season, if you haven't noticed, is when we tried not to be on the show at the same time, try to fuel any banter that we actually don't like each other, which I can assure you is not true.
Wait, it's just banter? It's not true?
Well, I mean, that's what we have to tell people so that they,
right. Okay, yeah, sorry, I'll go back into my mode about it.
Yeah, quite down. So anyway, so Ryan is back, and I do not have an intro for Ryan filled with Chargers or Padres. Actually, I can't use the Chargers anymore. That's off limits.
Who?
Padres or USC, any kind of USC things, but did want to kind of share with everybody something fairly scary happened in Ryan's immediate neighborhood, actually. And the shooting that took place over the weekend in California and San Diego was actually in Ryan's complex. So I think I speak for all of us, Ryan, when I say we were all glad to see and hear that you were okay during what was a scary situation, certainly unexpected from your standpoint. So glad to have you tonight. I'm sure it's been a crazy week. So hopefully for you, like for a lot of other people, talking about IU basketball for the next 45 minutes to an hour will be a good release for you and kind of a distraction from what's certainly been an odd week for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to forego my normal rant this week. And don't worry, anybody out there, I'm not going into politics. I'm not going to talk gun control. I'm not going to do anything like that. But yeah, the mass shooting in San Diego happened about 400 yards from my apartment. I was home when it happened. And those of you who follow me on Twitter, got a lot of what was going on because I tried to document it as best as possible and help the police get people into their apartments and things like that. But what I want to say, and I do want to make a statement, I guess, and that's, I just be nice to each other. I mean, realize we're in a very politically charged time, and people don't like each other because of certain things. I just ask you, if you're a fan of this show, if you're a fan of what we do here, if you're a fan of me, you know what? Go out this weekend and do something nice for somebody you wouldn't normally. If you have a neighbor you don't necessarily like, go over, shake his hand, and ask him how he is. If you have an old high school friend on Twitter who you argue with politics all the time and can't stand, send him a note, ask him how his family is. Just do something nice for somebody you wouldn't normally, because I think the world needs more of that. And life's too short, man. I mean, one of my neighbors was shot and did not come home from the hospital this week. She's never coming home. And 6 others' lives have been completely changed as a result of this. Life's too short for us to just beat each other's throats and be arguing. And I know you don't tune into this show to hear me talk about things like this, but this will be the last I'll discuss it, and we'll get back to basketball. But I would just implore you guys, if you're out there, be nice to each other. And do something nice for somebody you wouldn't normally. That kind of stuff can go a long way and can really help bridge some pretty serious divides we've got here. So, yeah, thank you guys for all the reaching out you did on Twitter and Facebook and through email, and I really appreciated it. I'm fine, but I would say just take care of each other. And that's all I'm going to say about it, and we'll get on to the Hoosiers, which is the reason you listen to this show.
All right, well said, Ryan. And like I said, glad to hear you're all right, and excited to spend some time with you.
I also want to say Andy was one of the first people to reach out via text, so I think he is. I am growing on him a little bit. I think he does like me. Jared also was there from the beginning. The three of us are our buddies, regardless of any ribbing we give each other. I know somebody reached out and was wondering if you guys actually liked me because of some of the jokes you drop, but I'm a big boy. I can take it. We give each other a little bit of garbage here and there, but it's all in good fun.
Hey, look, the Twitter picture on the Assembly Call profile is one of you choking me. So to be fair, if there's any of us who thinks that one doesn't like the other, it could be the other way around.
Hey, you know what? It was a moment of passion. It was
be that as it may. Yeah, it's fine. We're good. We're good. All right. So, as I said, we got a lot to talk about tonight. In our headline segment, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Thomas Bryant decision. We're going to talk about a couple recruiting updates with a couple non-Indiana notes on that front. One with a name that will be familiar to all IU fans. And then lastly, some news came out today about the Big Ten schedule. So while the schedule itself hasn't been released, basically talked a little bit about how they're going to deal with having the conference tournament a week early next week. So we're going to hit that a little bit. I know Ryan and I both are fairly against that. We got a bunch of questions from Twitter again that we'll hit, and hopefully if we've got time, we're going to touch on Juwan Morgan a bit more in the end, based on some comments that Sam Vecini of the Sporting News made on this week's podcast on the Brink about Juwan that I thought were really interesting, and I think one of the players that we're all really excited to think about as we head into next season. But first, let's have a quick word about this week's sponsor, SeatGeek. NBA playoffs are in full swing. You've got fracas, if you will, in the Washington-Boston game earlier. So those are in full swing. The NHL playoffs are going. Baseball has gotten started. And so SeatGeek for you is the smartest and easiest way to get tickets to every game. With their seamless mobile experience, you can buy and sell tickets in just 2 taps. SeatGeek helps you find the best seats at the best prices, fully guaranteed. Nothing quite like being there in person, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone. By far the easiest way I found to shop for tickets. So I'm looking to go for a Reds game here in Cincinnati for myself. And that's always the first place that I'm going to go and look for tickets, which there should be plenty available based on how I assume the Reds are going to play over the remainder of the season. But I can be anywhere, and in just a few taps, I can instantly find seats. And so SeatGeek is designed to make your ticket buying experience easier than ever. Doesn't end with sports. Also has plenty of concert, comedy and theater tickets available as well. And best of all, listeners here get $20 off their first SeatGeek purchase. Just download the SeatGeek app and enter promo code Assembly today. Again, that's promo code Assembly for $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. All right, you're listening to the Assembly Call Radio. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips. And Ryan, I want to talk a little bit more about Thomas Bryant and not necessarily about him directly, but more about some of the criticism that I think we've seen from fans, even in response to asking for Twitter questions for the show tonight. There were some people that have kind of said, he shouldn't go. He might not get drafted. I find that interesting, if for no other reason than two guys who were in this program went undrafted last year and made an impact in the NBA this year, in Yogi and Troy. So I find the criticism kind of odd on a variety of levels. But what's your, maybe put best? One of the Twitter questions came from Michael. He said, "Can you explain how fans bash and insult teenage and 20-year-old guys who decided to go to the next level? It infuriates me." Well, I probably fall in that same category. But Ryan, where do you kind of come down on some of the things that you, like all of us, have probably heard people say in response to the news that Thomas is going pro?
The year, we all expected Thomas Bryant to go pro at the end of this year. So, and you all expected OG Anunoby to go pro and potentially James Blackman Jr. And guess what? That's where we are. I know the season wasn't successful, but those guys are still going to be where we thought they were at the beginning of the year, and that's in the NBA draft. Thomas maybe had some more developing to do, both from a maturity standpoint and, physically and with his game. I get that sentiment from Hoosier fans, but this is a guy who could have gone out after his first year and stuck around to try and do something his second year. It didn't work out, but, we were lucky to get him a second year as Hoosier fans. So I'm completely supportive. This is a decision you have to know. He's making it for his family. There's so many considerations. It's not just I don't want to play for Archie Miller or I don't want to be at Indiana anymore decision. This is hey, you know what? I was selfish, in a positive way. I was selfish in coming back and giving up money last year when he certainly would have been a mid-first round pick. I think everybody was barreling towards that. I think every projection had him in the middle of the first round. He came back because he rightfully thought he had a lot to work on and he really enjoyed his time at Indiana. That was selfish as far as it goes for, what he could have done for his family. And I don't mean selfish in a negative way. I mean, he was thinking of himself and what he wanted to accomplish. And so he came back, and his draft stock dropped. He didn't have a great year compared to where he was projected to be. Certainly not where I thought he would be. But you know what? Now he's done what he thinks is good for his family. He thinks that he can work his way into the draft and be selected. And he's seen his former teammates. Like you said, Yogi and Troy Williams have both went undrafted, but with their work ethic, which they learned at IU, and with the development they had and the ability to get better that they had under their belts, they've wound up being successful. And I think Thomas can do that. I think if you talk about the three, Thomas is the most, likely to have a successful NBA career. And I think he will. I think he'll get on a roster and he'll play. He's got things you can't teach: size, that wingspan, his ability to run the floor. If he develops into a better ball handler and he develops into a guy who can step out on the floor and hit shots with more consistency, but doesn't make that his entire game and focuses on working in his post game, that's a guy who can be around the NBA for 10 years. Whether he's going to be a superstar, I don't know. But I think that he almost felt like he had to go now. Because another year that was a down year, losing minutes to Deron Davis and maybe not having a great season, he may have been knocked down another peg and may not have gotten his shot. At this point, he looks like a second-round pick. We'll see how he does at the combine and shows off. But right now, it looks like he's going to be a second-round pick. And I think he did what he thinks is best for himself and best for his family. And I don't know how you can hate on that. The guy gave 2 years to Indiana, and that was more than a lot of people expected when he signed up as a recruit.
Yeah, I think, and he certainly gave, from a passion standpoint, all that he had to IU. And I think, I think it's fair for, we talked about this a lot during the season. I think there were times when we weren't happy with the kind of expecting him to take the leap. Maybe no different than OG in that regard, where, everybody kind of wanted him to make that jump, and he didn't make as big a jump. I think he certainly improved things year to year. I don't think he made as big a jump as people may have hoped. But I still think there are reasons to believe that he can be successful in the NBA, and ultimately that's his choice.
Let's also remember he's a big guy who didn't have his point guard back. I mean, Yogi Ferrell and Troy Williams not being there made it a lot harder for everybody on offense. And I think those were two absences that people realized they'd be a big impact. They didn't realize how big an impact they'd have on the team as a whole on both ends of the floor. And additionally, you know what? Thomas is a young guy who's got a lot of time left to develop, and I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, I agree. He is really on the young side. I think that's one of the things that people can lose sight of is just how young he really is overall. And so I think that is another factor that NBA teams are going to look at and be excited by, that a guy that they can mold. So I think, again, we're going to talk a little bit more about him as we move forward here. But I'm excited for him. We'll kind of talk a little bit more about what that means for IU, and maybe a little bit more about his overall draft stock and NBA prospects. But just want to kind of hit that part. To me, it's I'm in no position to criticize these kids, and I think he made a decision that was well informed based on the process. Now, certainly getting an invite to the combine is a good start to that. And like I said in the opening, really wish him nothing but the best. And so, we're gonna be back here in a minute. We're gonna hit the headlines again. We're gonna talk some Thomas Bryant. We're gonna talk a little recruiting. We're gonna complain about Big Ten scheduling, and we'll be back to talk about all that and more on the Assembly Call Radio when we come back in a minute. All right, that is segment 1.
What do we clock in at?
That's a great question. Clocked in at 16:25. It looks like
it's actually quicker than I thought it was.
All right, so let me export this and save it. So
man, the XFL 30 for 30 is on right now, and I'm missing it.
All right, so we've got. All right, 1 down, 3 to go. All right, so that was really kept a piece of paper somewhere. All right, I said that was 14.
No, 16.
Nope, 16. That one doing good already. Everything's perfect.
Here for you. Here to help.
Appreciate it. Let's see. All right, 16:25. Jot this down somewhere here.
So you want to keep with Brian a little more? Or?
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about, because we got a question about, and we talked about this a little bit last week, but a question about kind of what it means from IU's perspective in terms of front court depth and who's kind of is the backup there. And I do think I'm curious to just kind of some quick thoughts on kind of what thoughts of him might be from an NBA perspective. So I think of the three, we hit that one the least in this, since we've already talked about him a decent amount. But I'm gonna
the NBA thing.
Yeah, I'm gonna just of the 3 headlines.
Oh yeah. We can talk about what it means for IU since we didn't hit that, but
yeah,
it's Deron Davis show down low.
Pretty much. All right, so I moved one of the questions up because it really has more to do with that anyway. All right, we will see if I can remember to get everything started at the right time. And
did you listen back to make sure we recorded that first?
Yeah, I could hear both of us, so that's a good sign.
Perfect.
That's all you can really ask for. As long as I don't send Jared 4 blank files where it's just silence, I'm gonna feel pretty good. I'm gonna feel pretty good. All right. All right. We'll start us off here in a minute. Get back to this. What is that? All right. I will start us off here. All right. All right, you are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Andy Bottoms here talking IU hoops with Ryan Phillips, and it's time for this week's headlines. So, one of these, the first one in particular, was one we talked about earlier on, but wanted to talk a little bit more about Thomas Bryant's decision to sign with an agent and remain in the draft. And I think, the big question that leaves from an IU perspective is one that John sent to us on Twitter, which was who will be the backup center? Juwan, Colin, will Clifton be ready? Because it can't be Priller, right? So Ryan, how do you answer the question of who IU's backup center is shaping up to be next season? Certainly will be the Deron Davis show, as we talked about between segments here. But beyond Deron, who do you think really steps into that backup role on the front court?
Well, I think you're going to have to see Juwan Morgan down there some. I think we've seen Colin Hartman sort of play in the post before when the team goes a little smaller. Remember, Archie Miller isn't a guy who's used a lot, who's had a lot of dominant individual post players before. So he seems to, and his teams have typically had good defensive ratings. So he's seemed to figure out ways around that. The pack line defense will certainly help with that. I mean, his style of defense will certainly help as it sort of clogs the middle with multiple defenders as opposed to just having it go one-on-one. So, that can compensate for a lack of size. I think you're going to have to see Clifton more, though. He's extremely thin right now. I think you're going to have to see him take some minutes at some point. I think ideally it would have been great if he was just basically fully developmental for a year because I think that he's got a high ceiling, but I think he's got a long way to go before he can contribute in the Big Ten. As it is, he's got to get on campus and get lifting weights right now, get stronger, get bigger, because he is rail thin and he'll get pushed around at this point. So I think there are guys in house that'll have to step up and really contribute in that position. But also, look, hey, Tim Priller may have to see some time at times if Deron Davis gets into foul trouble, which we did see some last year. So I think that, look, if the guy's on scholarship, you're going to have to use him. And Tim, to his credit, when he played late in the season, when he played extended minutes late in the season, he didn't look too bad, surprisingly. I'm not saying we need to hang our hat on that guy as our backup center, but, if guys get in foul trouble, guys get injured, you may have to go that far into the bench. I'm not sure a lot of people will feel comfortable with that, but you got to play with what you got. And so you'll have Colin Hartman, maybe Josh McRoberts, getting in there, Zach McRoberts getting in there and getting in the mix, maybe because they've got a little bit of size. But I think that it's pretty much going to be the Deron Davis show, and you're going to pray that he doesn't get into foul trouble. And then after that, you're going to have to figure things out, and it's going to be rough, especially with OG Anunoby, a guy who could play down there, gone. It's going to be Juwan Morgan and Deron Davis running things.
Yeah, it'll be interesting for me to see, how the pack line defense might keep Deron out of foul trouble by ideally, kind of packing in and making them shoot over top and not letting the ball get inside. That's one.
Right. There'll be lots of help for him in that defense.
So that's going to be important from that perspective. And I think the second is, I think Cliff Marshall, the new strength coach, his first job one, I think, is going to be to find a way to put 20 pounds on Clifton Moore's frame so that he might be ready to go. But I do think, Priller, as much as, we've kind of have joked about it, even Jared brought it up at one point last year where, why couldn't or shouldn't this guy see minutes? In a scenario where he's being asked to play a very specific role, which is really what he was asked to do at the end of the season last year, he came in and did it fairly well in a short period of time. Nobody's advocating that he gets 15 minutes a game.
I would say shockingly well, not fairly well. I think we were all surprised.
Yeah, true. I mean, and to your point, he's got 5 fouls. So if he uses those in 8 minutes, then so be it. And we'll kind of move on from there. So I think it'll be interesting to see there. Other quick thing on Bryant, just what are your kind of thoughts on him looking forward to the NBA? I know Jared and Alex Bozich had Sam Bassini from the Sporting News on Podcast on the Brink earlier this week. And he talked about, the things you like are the motor, the wingspan, his ability to step out and make shots. Obviously, what scares you is the same thing that has scared IU fans from a defensive perspective, and just his kind of lateral quickness and ability to really handle ball screens and things like that, I think is a big one. I think lower body strength is another. And even footwork, as you kind of, compare him to Deron in the post, was something that really stood out, how advanced in some ways Deron seems to be and how that's an area that Thomas, needs to continue to develop. I mean, what are your overall thoughts on a guy like Thomas in the NBA, and maybe what kind of role do you see him fitting in if he does make a roster?
Well, he's definitely an upside play for a team because he's so young and he has that wingspan and he has that size. And when he's engaged defensively and is moving his feet, he certainly has the ability to defend. The problem is, there's issues there with the quickness and side to side and recovery speed and maybe getting into a little bit. Getting too emotional and having that dominate what he does on the floor. I mean, that comes with maturity. And if a team can help him grow up and sort of baby him along, I think they could get a good player. I think he's a rotation player in the NBA. I really do. Maybe not as a rookie, but I think that you have a guy, when you have a guy with those physical gifts, you can't teach his length, his wingspan, and his ability to run the floor, his innate sense, his motor. You can't teach those things. Those he just has. But developing some more post moves, better, stronger finishing around the hoop, finishing through contact, which he's going to face in the NBA, and not getting emotional about it and staying level-headed. Those are things that a team can develop. I think he winds up on a roster next year. I don't know what his long-term prognosis is because I'm not sure how much development is left in the tank and how much an NBA team can develop that. There's a lot of times where if you don't make an impact as a rookie in the NBA, they kind of forget about you and move on to the next guy. So you got to hope that that's happened to Noah Vonleh.
Yep, that's exactly who I was thinking of when you said that.
And that was one of the problems I had with him going out. Yeah, he got drafted in the top 10, but he got put on a team where he wasn't going to play immediately. He was going to be shuttled back and forth through the D League. And if you don't make an impact, they can forget about you. I mean, even if you were a first-round pick, they can forget about you. That's the kind of league it is. They want results because every GM is on the clock immediately. Every coach is on the clock immediately. And so they're looking to win. So if Thomas can do some things to help a team win next year, I think his long-term future is secure. But we'll see if he gets that opportunity. It's going to be rough. I mean, there's no question about that. Coming out this year, it's a deep draft, and it's going to be rough to find a spot.
All right, so recruiting, I kind of lumped a couple things together here for our second headline. You're listening to the Assembly Call, though. I should remind you, this is Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and talking about IU basketball. So a couple recruiting stories from non-Indiana players. I think that's been the big focus was, the headway that people think and hope, Coach Miller has been able to make within the state. But a couple interesting, guys that have really cropped up over the last few weeks. One of which is Trendon Watford. So Christian Watford's younger brother, 6'8", was actually the runner-up for Mr. Basketball in Alabama as a sophomore. He's currently ranked 12th by 24/7 in the class of 2019 as a 5-star kid. Interestingly enough, it came out that IU had not been previously involved in recruiting him with the prior staff. Now, part of that, I guess, maybe is because his class is a couple years out, but did think that was kind of odd based on, one, his experience with, being at so many IU games to watch his brother, and two, just the fact that, his brother had been there. So, Alabama has been involved for a long time, and the family obviously lives there and things like that. But, Ryan, what's your quick scouting report, if you have one, on Trendon Watford and what fans might think about when they think about him potentially coming to IU?
Well, I like him as a player. He reminds me of his brother, honestly, maybe a little stronger version of his brother. It's so funny because I remember seeing Trendon on the floor after games when I would go to games when Christian was there. He was there all the time. And, with his he had kind of big hair, but you could tell he was going to be a player. And, I think this is a guy Indiana has to go hard after. And Archie Miller's really got to get himself involved with the family. Obviously, it's a different coaching staff. This isn't the coaching staff he was visiting when he would come to Indiana. I agree. I think it's odd that Indiana wasn't involved with him. But, that's in the past. That's something you can't worry about. You just got to go get the guy that you're going to get. Because he is a legacy at Indiana, and he's a guy who certainly will listen because that's what his brother did. And his brother is, for some reasons, a legend at Indiana because of that big shot against Kentucky, because of the numbers he finished at the end of his career. I mean, that's a guy who is a big name at Indiana and Indiana history. So I think you got to go get him. I don't have a full scouting report on him yet just because I haven't seen enough of him. But from what I have seen, I love the kid's game. I love how aggressive he is. And I love his ability to sort of do everything on the floor is a positive. And I'm sure if Indiana gets more involved in his recruitment as time moves on, I'll get a full scouting report for him. But I really like what I've seen so far, especially at his age. I mean, he's got a full year until he's got to make his college decision. So over a full year before he's got to start looking into that. So I think it's a great start that Archie Miller's gotten involved with him.
Yeah, and I think because he's a little bit further out, the fact that Archie got a later start with him is less big of a deal than some of the others. But the other guy to talk about quickly is Cole Swider. He had a really good performance in the EYBL event over the weekend. I think finished in the last game on Sunday, 5 of 9 from 3-point range with 21 points. So he's a 6'8" guy, ranked outside the top 100 in the class of 2018 based on the last 247 rankings that I saw. But a guy who, good size, can really shoot it. Also a little bit of toughness to him, not just a guy who's only going to play on the perimeter, but has a really good looking shot. Recently narrowed his list to 8 schools. IU was one of them, despite getting involved relatively late in the recruitment. Any quick thoughts on Swider?
Yeah, I mean, a Barrington, Rhode Island guy. That's not exactly a basketball hotbed typically, Rhode Island, but no, I really like his jump shot. I mean, that's I think the what you're getting with him is a great jumper, but you're also getting a guy at 6'8" and 210 pounds who's pretty built already. I mean, consider he's going to put on weight this year, next year. I think he could probably wind up playing at a more solid 225. Some of that 210 obviously isn't perfect weight, but some better weight put on him in a weight program. Everybody seems to think he's going to Xavier. They've been in on him, almost from the beginning. But Indiana's got a chance because they're in the mix. And, I like the way he plays, and the fact that he's playing so well against great competition bodes well for him. I'm sure he'll make a jump in the rankings. He was one of the more impressive kids early on. I also like the way he defends, but this is a kid with a pure jump shot, mid-range, long range. It doesn't matter. He's got to work on being stronger finishing, not unusual for a guy at his age. But I think that this is a guy who has a lot of talent on both ends of the floor, and you can tell why Archie Miller's such a fan. He's clearly going after him, and Swider has said that Archie Miller has talked to him about being the centerpiece of next year's class. And based on what I saw from the highlights of the EYBL, that's not shocking to me. That seems like a guy who could be the centerpiece because of how well he plays an all-around game.
All right, so the last headline that I had actually came out today, and it's about the Big Ten schedule. Not that the Big Ten schedule itself has been released, but some logistical things. So for those that don't know, the Big Ten is having the Big Ten tournament next year at Madison Square Garden in New York because of the presence of Rutgers and whatever other grand plans Jim Delaney has to turn the Big Apple.
You can just say it's for dumb reasons.
10.
That's fine. You can just say
it's for money, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, so yeah, for reasons that I probably am not excited about, but it probably for similar reasons that it was in DC this year. But anyway, so the problem with that is that other leagues, the Big East in particular, also has their conference tournament in Madison Square Garden, as they typically do, which means that they can't both be there at the same time, which means that the Big Ten is going to be, it will wrap up, the championship game will be a week before Selection Sunday, as opposed to being, one of the last games, which it usually is. And so what that does is present some logistical challenges, and I'll read this from NBC Sports College Basketball Talks post on this. So in order to make that timing work, the conference will essentially have to eliminate a week of league play. To make that a reality, the Big Ten has decided that each member of the league will play a home game and a road game the first weekend of December. They'll play either Friday, Sunday, or Saturday, Monday, depending on when and where they play an ACC Big Ten Challenge game. That event will be held on the Tuesday and Wednesday prior to the start of Big Ten play. In other words, during the final week of November and the first week of December, which will be 3 weeks after the start of college basketball season and upwards of a month before any high major conference starts their league play, the Big Ten will force teams to play one of their most important non-conference games and their first 2 league games within the span of 6 or 7 days. So Ryan, I don't need probably to tee this up very much for you. Why don't you give your thoughts about early season conference games and the Big Ten having the tournament in New York at all?
Conference games should not be played in December. I have long been a proponent of that, especially like the middle and end of December when students aren't on campus. Those are the most dead, boring conference games ever. There's no juice in the arenas. I mean, it's unbelievably dumb to do this by the Big Ten. You're ruining the product. And then nobody in New York cares about the Big Ten. They don't care. Rutgers is not going to bring a packed house to the Big Ten tournament. They're going to be gone after one round anyway. So I don't know. This is just, I mean, this is like scheduling every Saturday game for noon Eastern. Like, do you want a bad product? Do you really want that? Early December conference games it has to be one of the dumbest ideas Jim Delaney's had, and that is saying a lot. So I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know how they expect this to be successful. January is when conference season is supposed to start. I realize games, because conferences are bigger, are bleeding into the last week of December, and I think it's awful. January is when the Big Ten starts. It's when the Big Ten has always traditionally started. You occasionally will get a game on New Year's Eve or something like that, but for the most part, January is when conference season starts, and now this is atrocious. Just so you can have the tournament in New York and appease people who don't even care to be appeased. I don't get it, and I think this is moronic. The Big Ten tournament should be in the heart of Big Ten territory, which is Chicago or Indianapolis every year. Nobody was complaining about not having the tournament there or about having the tournament there. That was central to everybody. You got a lot of fans in there. Now you're doing it in DC, which isn't close to anybody but Maryland. You're doing it in New York, which isn't close to anybody but Rutgers. I mean, it's so stupid, and it's just to reach out to two fan bases who are, by comparison to the rest of the league, minuscule. So I think this is just another horrible move by the Big Ten, and it's dumb, and they should cut it as soon as they can.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't really have a lot to add. The only thing I would add, though, is this isn't going to stop those early season conference games, those other conference games, from being in the December time period when students are there. And IU, as an example, last year, I think they had at least two, maybe three home games when students weren't even on campus. And obviously the atmosphere both gives, the home team, an advantage in the cases where the students are there, but just makes for a better atmosphere for people to watch on TV and any place else. And so you're kind of doing a whole lot of things that really diminish the overall atmosphere and product in the name of, trying to expand East. Sure, money's involved, as it always is with these things. But I just struggle to believe that this is a great idea, and we probably could rant on this for a little bit longer, but we'll stop ourselves. We'll exercise some self-control in Jared's absence and stop ourselves from that. But as we look ahead to what we will have next, we're going to turn our attention to your questions. So you asked via Twitter and Facebook. We're going to answer those. That's next on the Assembly Call. Stay with us. That was 17:59.
Wow, we got to be quick.
Yeah.
What's our number we got to hit?
All right, so let me export this here. I'll look and see where we are total time here in a moment. Yeah, we can kind of rapid fire the questions fairly easily, I think. And if we don't get to all of them, we don't get to all of them. And if we don't have a ton of time to talk to Juwan Morgan,
we could have me answer one, you answer one, maybe.
Or at least one. The first of us can be quick, and the other can have a quick rebuttal if necessary. All right. So let me get these teed up here. All right, I'll go to you. Well, the first one,
adjusted O&D.
First one's offensive defense. Do you want that one first?
Yeah. I'll say top 40 for both, I think.
Okay.
That's pretty inoffensive.
Okay.
And then you can give details, I guess.
All right, that'll work. Yeah, Jared put his own question in here, so that'll be good.
What is it?
Yes. How would you compare Robert Johnson to a former Hoosier like, say, Greg Graham?
I think you have to answer that because you have more of a Greg Graham connection than I do.
All right. I tell you what, I'm gonna flip the order of the.
Okay.
Let's see. I'm gonna make the Greg Graham question the second one, so that I'll take that one first, because I'll still read it and then I can just take it and then you can.
I'll just make fun of it.
I'll just flip those around. It's funny because on Peegs, their podcast this week, somebody compared him, and then in the same guy was like something was mentioned it might have been the same person who talked about it that wrote up the write-up, but it's been twice this week. There have been Greg Graham references that Jared did not make, which is stunning, quite honestly.
Do we have 50 minutes overall?
Yeah, we have 50. Let me.
So we do like 10 for this segment?
maybe let me. Okay, so we've got. So we got 1758. It looks like for that. So at this point, we had 1625 and 1758, which puts us at 1834. 23. So we've got 15 minutes left. So yeah, let's try to keep this to 10 max.
Keep me updated on the time.
All right, I'll do my best to do that. I forgot for the good portion of it. All right, we'll get us going here in a moment. Forgot I don't need that part actually. All right, welcome back to the Assembly Call. This is your host, Andy Bottoms, with Ryan Phillips. And, remember, go to assemblycall.com/join to activate your free membership. Get our weekly 6-banner Saturday news roundup, plus our post-game analysis emails the morning after every IU game. You have to be a member to get them, and the URL is assemblycall.com/join. So we're here talking IU basketball and wanted to hit some questions as we've done these last few weeks, and got a pretty good influx of questions via Twitter. So we're gonna try to take these one. We'll each take one and then give the other a quick chance to rebut if there's a need to do so. So first question is from Craig. Predict Ken Palm's adjusted offense and adjusted defense rankings for next year's team. Stay in the top 25 for offense. Can the team crack the top 25 for defense?
I'm going to go top 40 for both. How about that? I know it's kind of a punt on the question there a little bit, but Archie Miller's teams tend to be in the top 40 of each, or at least on the verge of that. I think you may see a little drop in offensive efficiency as they learn a new system. That's going to affect the entire season. I mean, you're going to see them getting into it early, so it may be rough going early on, as it is anytime there's a new change of system. But I think also they'll smooth it out towards the end and be better. But overall, that'll count. So I would say top 40 for both. I think the defense is going to be wildly improved just based on the system he's bringing in, based on the players who will be coming back, and the way he teaches defense and the assistant coaches he brought in. So I would say top 40 for both. Do you have any thoughts on the matter, Andy? Do you think one will be better than the other?
I could see the defense making a move just because that's what, Archie has been known for. And I can see the offense taking a slide back. I mean, at this point, certainly if James Blackman Jr. doesn't come back, I think there could be some questions on offense. I think they certainly want to get out and run. Maybe that helps cover up some blemishes. But we've talked about, if he leaves, is there really a go-to scorer? So I think that could bog the offense down a little bit at times. So I think there's a fair chance for the offense to regress a little bit, whether that pushes them outside the top 25. I think that's possible. But I also think, if he installs a system defensively, I think the athletes are there to make it work. So I'll give the defense a chance to crack the top 25. This question comes from @Assembly Call. How would you compare Robert Johnson to a former Hoosier like, say, Greg Graham? So, Jared's presence via his own question here is certainly felt on the show. We have done this quite a bit Jared has done this frequently, where he's compared a number of players to Greg Graham. Robert Johnson appeared to be on that trajectory, kind of took a little bit of a step back from that last year. So I'm not sure he's quite at the Greg Graham level yet. Also has really filled out his frame from a physique standpoint in a way that Greg Graham was always kind of wiry and was not able to do. But we did see a recruit whose name is escaping me at the moment compared to Greg Graham this week on the Peaks podcast. So, Greg Graham clearly at the top of many people's minds, not just Jared. So I don't know that Robert Johnson at this point compares favorably, but a fair question. And we hope to, make a weekly occurrence of trying to compare somebody to Greg Graham. So this is step one in that process.
Andy, in denying that Robert Johnson is the next Greg Graham, you may wind up being fired for that. Just to let you know, Jared does have veto power over the roster here. So
possible.
At least I think he does. So it's possible you may be endangered. I'll speak up for you, but I can only do so much, man.
Yeah. Well, if we talk about kind of like spindly guys who are, who have some athleticism, maybe Curtis Jones is more of a like kind of look-alike from a Greg Graham perspective, just from a physical standpoint. So we'll see. All right, this question from Nate: which player on next year's team will benefit most from a more structured offense? Who do you like for that one?
Geez, that's a great question, actually, Nate. Congratulations. You had the best question of the week. And yes, Jared, you do not count for having the best question of the week. I would say I think that it's going to be Juwan Morgan, because I think they're going to find ways to get him the ball in places where he can succeed, where I thought he was floating a lot last year, out between perimeter and post and all that stuff. I think Archie Miller, his offense is more structured, and I think he's going to find a way to get Juwan Morgan the ball in better positions where he's not just standing outside the three-point line and maybe shooting. I think they'll get they'll work on his ball handling. Obviously, he's been a better ball handler than guys his size usually, but I think that they'll find ways to get him in pick and roll situations with De'Ron Davis. You've got a lot of size there. You'll have a lot of, big to big passing going on. And I think you'll also see him, start to drive on his own and get to the hoop. I think that Robert Johnson could also benefit from the same thing, from having, the offense get him to positions where he has better looks at the basket that he wasn't getting last year, particularly from the outside. You saw his shooting go in and out, and as most of the team did this past year. So I think that he will benefit from an offense that will more align with his talents and possibly get him into places where he can succeed better than sort of the different way that Tom Crean ran things. So what do you think, Andy? I mean, is there a guy you've got specifically targeted?
I think Robert Johnson becomes interesting here. We talked about last year, he kind of struggled to figure out what his role really was on the team.
Exactly, yeah.
And so I think that, and I don't know that it has much to do with structured offense, but in terms of like fewer, big time mouths to feed on an offense. So I think he's a guy. Juwan would have been the other one that came to mind, but I think Robert Johnson for me is that guy. So you're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips talking IU basketball. And remember, you can join us after every IU basketball game over at assemblycall.com and every Friday right here for Assembly Call Radio. So a few other Twitter questions that we can kind of bang through here quickly. Jeremy from Facebook, at what point will we be able to say no one is transferring? If someone does and JBJ leaves, will Coach Archie Miller pick up anyone else or save the scholarship? I don't know if we can say that. I certainly won't feel comfortable saying nobody's transferring until we hear the news about Blackman. We'll kind of see what happens there. I think if someone transfers and Blackman leaves, I actually don't think Miller would use up the scholarship. He's a guy who at Dayton typically would not use up the full allotment. And I'm really not sure what's available out there. They're already trying to recruit a lot. They're going to lose a lot of guys into next year with a pretty large senior class. So I would assume he would leave it open at that point. We're pretty deep into the process. Ryan, you have a different view on that than I do, or do you think that's the way that'll go?
I think it's more likely they look for some kind of senior transfer in the post or something like that if they are short a spot. I don't think he goes and gets a freshman, just because I think that at this point, the recruiting ranks are pretty much all picked over, and you're not going to get anybody who's going to make a real impact. You're almost filling a scholarship just to fill a scholarship. I think also he knows he's going to have a bit of a grace period his first year where he's got to win, but he doesn't have to win a championship. And if you're short a guy, it's better than, you're not going to find somebody who's going to put you over the top as a championship. It's better not wasting that scholarship if you've got a guy you believe in the next class. So I think it does kind of hamstring you a little bit. And I would expect if there is a senior transfer to be had, maybe they would go that route. But I don't see them adding another guy unless for some reason a really great player becomes available for whatever reason. And then you can maybe see that somebody who's really going to have an impact, but I don't see that player available right now.
I think it's just been hard for them really to even get involved with anybody because they were so far over to begin with. So what kind of serious conversations could you have even had to this point about that as a possibility? So yeah, I tend to believe there's nothing there. Badger Banker on Twitter, good, not planned, but a Wisconsin related question to Ryan. Will Archie be able to beat the Badgers more than that over caffeinated guy used to?
Don't make me think about Wisconsin right now. It's been a rough
week. A little bit tough. Really have last, to be fair. So,
I think that his system will lend itself to fitting against the Badgers more, especially with the pack line defense. I think that he'll be able to fit his system against them much better than Tom Crean did, with more of a wide open offense. I think that he's got more structure and he's got better defense. So I think there is a chance that he's better against
all right, so
the Badgers.
Yeah, I agree. Last one from Jonathan: with no top recruits and losing so much, is making the tournament even a realistic expectation? I would say yes. I think when you look at some of the other turnover in the Big Ten, certainly this roster is not one without talent. So I think that's a realistic expectation. I don't know that I'm going to, feel like it's a complete failure if they would not make it, but I think it's a reasonable expectation. Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's an expectation. Absolutely. I think they brought in a lot of talent last year. It didn't necessarily show up all the time on the court, but they brought in some good guys. They've got some great guys returning. Colin Hartman will be the leader they missed last year. Robert Johnson will hopefully develop into that, and Archie Miller will be a different guy. And so I don't think you can compare last year's team to what's going to happen with this year. I believe that this is definitely going to be a tournament team. I don't think there's any question about it right now, unless something crazy happens. I would say yes.
All right. Well, that does it for the Twitter questions. We'll hit some more next week as we go. And so with that, we'll come up to our final segment where we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about Juwan Morgan. Stick with us. All right. That was about 10:13. So we were almost right on where we wanted to be.
Okay. What time do you have to start the outro?
Let's see. Let me export that. Let me save this, and then I'll do some math time, and then then I'll be able to answer your question.
John Wall looking good here.
Yeah, he's been pretty good in the playoffs, at least the portions that I have watched, which has not been a ton.
I'm gonna get my phone. I'm gonna grab my phone charger real quick.
All right, so we're at 44:37, which means we got 5:23 left, and I think he said it's 30-some seconds.
All right, much better.
So I need to I believe.
My friend is British, and she doesn't understand today's issues. I was just allowed. She's like, "You guys don't all get health care?" I was like, "Nope."
Oh boy. Okay.
She's like, "How does that work?" I'm like, "You went to college here." She's like, "Yeah, but I still have my healthcare from back home."
Yeah. What are you gonna do? All right. So I am. All right. I think I do not need that anymore. All right. So we have 4 minutes and 47 seconds to talk about Juwan Morgan.
4 minutes, huh?
Yeah, big one. So I'll kind of lead into it with kind of some of the stuff from Podcast on the Brink. They were asking Vicini a little bit about kind of upcoming IU prospects outside of the guys who might be in this year. And they obviously talked about Duran, but he also seemed kind of intrigued by Juwan Morgan just as a guy who can do so many different things. And I think we've all kind of alluded to at various points how important he could be.
Just be quick in your
role next year. Yeah.
Just be real quick.
Just I'm getting the lengthiness out of the way now, and then we'll.
Yeah.
All right. So. All right, I will start us off here. You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Andy Bottoms here talking IU basketball with Ryan Phillips, and we've been doing player breakdowns as we've gone through, and this week seemed like a good week to hit a guy that Ryan just talked about, Juwan Morgan. And so on this week's Podcast on the Brink, Alex Bozich and Jared were talking to Sam Vicini from Sporting News about kind of upcoming guys to watch for in the NBA from IU. And a guy that Sam brought up that I thought was interesting was Juwan Morgan, and he was interested in him because of being a guy who has, can do a lot of different things, has shown the ability to initiate offense, good offensive and defensive rebounding rate, solid block percentage, can defend a lot of different positions, shoots the ball well from the free throw line. So a lot of things to like, maybe not great at any one thing in particular, but a guy with a really well-rounded game. So, Ryan, you touched on Juwan a bit in the answer to one of the questions we had, but as you start looking forward to expectations for him in his junior season, which actually is kind of odd. I felt like he's been around a little bit longer than that, but what are your kind of baseline expectations for him as he's surely going to step into a larger role? What are you expecting?
Well, it does seem like he's been here forever, but he was also committed for about a year before he stepped on campus. So I think that has a lot to do with it. He's been a part of IU for a long time. I think the key for Juwan is just staying healthy. He hasn't stayed healthy for a long stretch. And so we don't really know what he can do long term. I think we've seen the talent there, and he's a guy who can play inside and out. He can play defense. He certainly is a great defender when he plays consistently when he's on the floor. He's got a little sneaky athleticism. He's not a huge leaper, but he's a guy with some athleticism, some quick twitch, ability. And he's bigger than people think he is. I mean, he's a big guy who can do a lot of things, and he can shoot from the outside as well when he gets in rhythm. I think he shoots too many threes, but that's something he's got to work on this offseason. But no, I agree that I think that's the next guy, certainly that you have to look at in sort of an OG and an OB light scenario. He's a little bigger than OGs. He's not as long. He's not as quick, I think, and he doesn't necessarily have the defensive instincts. He has good defensive instincts, but OGs are off the charts. So I think that's certainly the next guy who can do it a lot of things for you. He's a well-rounded guy. And I think that's the guy I would be looking at if I was a scout at Indiana. Deron Davis would certainly be in there as well if you want a traditional post player. And then you've got guys like Devontae Green, who has NBA pedigree, and Curtis Jones, who has the talent. He just has to show it and have it show up. So I agree. I think that Juwan is the guy, and I expect him to be a guy who's going to average, 15 points and grab you 7 rebounds if he can stay healthy and reach his potential.
Yeah, as I look at him statistically, he made 65% of his twos last year, which was good for 40th in the nation. And so, his ability to finish around the rim, again, that stat seems funny to me. I felt like as a team, IU really struggled to finish around the rim, which I know is something we talked about, but his free throw rate was really good. Got to the line 88 times and made 74% of them when he got there. So he was able to draw a lot of fouls. Also committed a decent number of fouls. And again, as we talked about with Deron Davis, I think that's going to be important for him. But he's the kind of guy to a certain extent that, I think Miller has had success with, a little bit undersized to play the power forward spot, which he will likely be asked to do, but can give IU a chance to take advantage of some mismatches as they go forward. So, do you see him, Ryan, in our last, minute here, do you see him, stepping into a starting role? One of our debates last year was whether he was better in the starting lineup or coming off the bench. So where do you see him fitting in that regard?
I think he starts this year at the 4 next to Deron Davis in the front court. I think that he has to. I think that just with the talent drain, he's going to have to do that.
Yeah, I think so too. I just think, as you look ahead, he's a guy that is going to need to be on the floor. I think to be able to do defensively what Miller's going to want to do on that end of the floor, I think he becomes extremely important, as we've talked about. And I think because he can guard so many different positions, got good length and can really get out and challenge shots. So I think he's going to be, a guy who really could make a leap. And I think, to a certain extent, if you look at him statistically last year, he was really able to do that maybe more than we might give him credit for. But because there were so many other guys, everybody was looking at, I think that was a little bit different. So he's certainly one to watch as we move forward. So that will do it for this week's edition of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure you join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live simulcast of the Assembly Call radio recording. Or you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to go to assemblycall.com/join to activate your free Assembly Call membership. So thank you for listening. And on behalf of Ryan, we appreciate you coming and hanging out with us. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you next week. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers. I think that was right about the right time.
Did you have to put the music in?
What's that?
Didn't you have to put the music in, or?
I did that. I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good. 5:23. Perfect. Yeah.
Close enough.
Had it the whole time. Probably.
All right. You'll be shocked,
right,
but I have to go get dinner.
that is the.
I did not complain about being hungry the entire show.
That is the stunner of all stunners. All right, well, hang on. Let me do this real quick here.
I know Mr. Kaufman does not like it when we talk about me being hungry.
No, you're good. You're good. All right, so that is done. I will save that. And for those of you who joined us on the Hangout, we appreciate it. Hopefully it wasn't a complete train wreck. So we'll find out. We'll get our report card from Jared after this on how we did, and then depending on who's actually back next week, then that'll be the answer for.
You're the teacher's pet. You're going to get a good rating. He's going to find a way to rip me. I don't know what it's going to be, but he'll find a way.
I'm pretty sure that Hannah has a makeup soccer game next Thursday, so I may just not be here anyway. So you can. You can craft at that point. You can craft whatever narrative you want around why I am or am not on. So that's your chance to kind of throw me under and say, well, he was gonna be here, but things didn't go well a week ago. So anyway, all right. Well, we appreciate, like I said, we appreciate everybody's
thanks, guys.
questions and hanging in with us while we try to muddle through and get this together. A little bit less banter probably between segments because I was too busy trying to make sure I didn't screw anything up. So anyway, it should be a good one. And Ryan, it was good chatting with you. We haven't talked in a while other than over text. So
yeah, you too, buddy.
Hopefully we can have the entire band back together at some point in the next couple of weeks. We got a couple good topics. You had one that you sent last week that I think we all want to wait and hit when we're all here. About kind of what we want IU to look like from a program perspective and kind of who we would want them to emulate. So kind of tease that, and then I had the idea of doing like a draft of players on the team between the three of us to figure out like kind of who could come up with either the best. If there's enough players, we might be we're still close enough to 15. We could each draft 5. So
my team's going to be the best. I can already.
If we act quickly, we got walk-ons though. McRoberts isn't counting; it's a scholarship number, so that would give us 15 and. I'm sure we got other, walk-ons that we could do that with. So hopefully we'll get to those things at some point in the off season. We'll certainly have plenty of that to talk through, and hopefully some good reports on Bryant from the NBA Combine. So we'll figure out what of that we're going to hit next week. So all right, thanks everybody. Thanks Ryan.
Thanks, buddy. Talk to you soon.
All right, later.